Hi, I'm Gary, and this is EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles, and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. On the show today, we'll be looking at an ever-increasing scourge in the charging world, EV charging cable theft. This season of the podcast is sponsored by Zapmap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence wherever you go. Our main topic of discussion today is cable theft. It's becoming more and more of a problem for charge point operators and, by extension, EV drivers. It leads to extra costs, charging anxiety for drivers, and a headache for the charging companies. Today we'll look at what the issues are and what the potential solutions are. But let's start with a little history lesson. When the railway started to go electric back in the 1980s, British Rail, as it was at the time, spent a lot of time and money running huge cable runs alongside the railway lines to feed the power to the tracks and the various substations along the way. These cables were made from copper, mainly due to its excellent conductive power, meaning energy could be passed along without losing a huge amount to things like heat and resistance. Naturally, it didn't take long for the criminal element of society to realise that these copper wires would be worth quite a lot in scrap value. So they started raiding the cable runs overnight, stripping the copper off and selling it to scrapyards. As you can imagine, this caused a lot of problems for the rail companies who suddenly found their trains unable to run. To cut a long story short, they replaced it, added some protection, and managed to reduce or at least control the theft. Still happens, but not as much. Fast forward 40-odd years, and we're now in a situation where there are a large number of rapid and ultra-rapid charging units being installed all across the country. At the time of writing this, April 2025, using Zapmap data from March 2025, the number of rapid and ultra-rapid chargers in the UK, i.e. the ones with fixed cables, was 15,462 units with a total of 27,303 connectors. Obviously, each of these connectors will have a cable attached to it. The thing to remember about these 27,303 rapid and ultra-rapid cables is that they're very similar to the cables transporting the energy to the railway line, in that they are centred with copper. So what's now started happening, fairly recently in fact, is that a number of charge point operators are being hit by cable thefts. People are arriving, usually overnight, and sawing off the charging cables to sell for scrap. Instavolt has been hit by this 33 times at 13 sites in the West Midlands, costing them £410,000 to replace cables. They've had 174 cables stolen, and the replacement cost is up to £3,000 per cable, plus the time, manpower, and lost income associated with that. They're not the only ones. MFG, GridServe, BEV, and Osprey Charging have also suffered thefts. Thefts are fairly widespread, although Rotherham and Newark and Norwich appear to be fairly heavy cable theft hotspots. CPOs believe it's organised crime gangs that are doing this, expecting a high monetary haul from the copper inside. Now, copper's value has been rising, reaching an 11-month high of a little over $9,000 per tonne on the London Metal Exchange recently. Forecasts of a 4.6% increase in global copper demand last year, driven by renewable energy systems and the expansion of EV fleets, and a limited supply, make copper a prime target for thieves. Cable theft, therefore, has a number of knock-on effects. Primarily, it inconveniences the EV drivers who can turn up to large sites and find that all the cables have been cut, meaning none of the units are available to use. If you're running low on charge, that could be an issue. Secondarily, it inconveniences the charge point operators. They need to take the charger offline, source and pay for a new cable, send an engineer around and get the cable fitted. Now, all of these things cost money and help to slow down the return on investment for the charge point operators. This in turn slows down utilisation, which slows down the length of time before we can see charge point operators reducing pricing. The irony of this is that a modern charging cable doesn't actually have a lot of copper in it. It's worth, depending who you ask, about £15 all in for the copper, which is not a lot for a prison sentence when you get caught. But while the amount of copper inside a cable is relatively minor, the expensive part of cable theft is replacing them. A non-cooled cable, i.e. from a charger putting out about 150 kilowatts or lower, can cost anything up to £2,000. If it's a higher power cable that needs liquid cooling, the costs go up to around £3,000 each. Then there's the cost to have the cables reinstalled. Water-cooled cables are more expensive to install, of course. Then there's the bit that people don't consider: cable management systems. These are the devices that hold the bulk of the cable weight and allow the device to extend and retract and reach those awkwardly located charge ports. I'm looking at you, Audi. So some of these you can simply install a new charge cable, clamp and retractor cable. However, some need a new retractor cable drum, which can be around £1,000 a unit and are expensive to install. So when one charge cable is stolen, it can be up to £5,000 to replace, and a lot of chargers have two. So, what are charge point operators doing about it? Well, surprisingly, not a great deal at the moment, actually. Some have put CCTV in there, but this hasn't discouraged the thefts from happening. It just meant the thieves come in wearing balaclavas or motorbike helmets to hide their identity. Although BEV released footage recently of some dimwits sawing off their cables without a head covering. To make things worse for him, he turned and stared directly at the camera at one point. Hopefully the long arm of the law will be knocking on his door soon. Often, CCTV can be enough to help the police, but not always. The other way is to track the copper inside using some sort of AirTag type system. This has happened in the past. In one instance, it led police to an individual's house, but it often ends at a scrapyard where the proprietor will claim ignorance of the provenance of the metal. "Oh, sorry mate, a bloke arrived on a bicycle with a load of copper wire in his carrier. Asked for cash and left. Didn't get his name, address or nothing." So there's not a great deal the police can do there. The problem with both of these solutions is that they're reactive. The cables have still been cut, the chargers are still out of commission, and EV drivers are still unable to charge. What charge point operators need is some sort of deterrent to stop the cables being taken in the first place. Osprey Charging are trialling a device called the cable alarm on some of their units. It detects when a charger cable has been cut or removed, immediately activating an audible alarm and a flashing beacon. It can also be linked to charge point operators' notification and management systems, as well as existing security systems and site lighting. So in theory, when a cable is cut, the alarm sounds, the CPO is immediately notified, all the lights in the area turn up to maximum, and CCTV is turned on. Instavolt have put in place something they call Cable Guard. It's Kevlar cable covers alongside forensic dye, which is the sort of stuff the armoured cars use when transporting money, coupled with some AI-powered CCTV and proximity sensors to sound an alarm when the cables are removed from the charging hub perimeter. Tesla have gone a different route, as was to be expected, and they've designed their superchargers so that the copper inside them is engraved with the words Tesla along the length of the cable, so that anyone buying this will know that it's come from a supercharger. I'm not sure personally how much of a deterrent that would be to thieves, but it might just add another step into the process whereby the copper has to be melted down to remove the inscription prior to being sold on. One solution that I have heard mentioned several times is retractable cables or cables in cabinets. These are released when a payment method is shown. As a short-term solution, I can see how that would be appealing, but it's worth remembering that for some drivers, such as full-time wheelchair users, having to open a cabinet, retrieve a cable, and manhandle it around into your car can be a lot more hassle than for an able-bodied person. Secondly, if we want to move to plug and charge, which I think a lot of people do, that won't work. The idea with plug and charge is that the connection between the car and the charger initiates the payment authorization. If payment authorization is needed to release a cable, it sort of defeats the object of plug and charge. I've also heard people talk about bringing your own cable, which is fine if you're using a 22 kilowatt charger or something like that. But to have to buy and transport a cable capable of handling anything up to 400 kilowatt charging will be both practically and financially prohibitive. Of course, the easier quote-unquote solution is to remove the cables altogether. We've talked in the past on this show about wireless charging and the advantage that had been made there. Now, wireless isn't quite ready for the big time with some of the high speeds currently being seen with companies like Zeekr. And there's many a change needed to move from cable charging to wireless charging, both by the charger manufacturers and the vehicle OEMs. But nobody can say that removing the cables from the charging equation is not going to stop cable theft. There is another aspect of this that I want to talk about, and that's home cable thefts. Across the UK, we have a large number of home chargers that have been installed across the last 8 or 10 years. Some of them are dumb chargers, some of them are smart chargers. Regardless of that, they all need a cable to connect to the car. In some cases, the cable is attached to the home charger, otherwise known as a tethered unit, and in others, you bring your cable with you to plug in. But we're starting to see cable thefts happening at homes. It's not a big number, but it's caused by a number of factors. One is how you set your car up to deal with cables when the charger's stopped, and the other is how the cable and the wall box interact. So let's start with that last one. A lot of chargers, especially the newer smart ones, will lock your cable into place when you plug it in. In order to release that cable, you'll need to enter a code or press a combination of buttons to allow that to happen. Make sure when you set your wall box up that you change that code from the default. Also, your vehicle might have a setting inside which says something along the lines of release charge cable when charge complete. Now, this is good if you're in a car park using a DC rapid charger and want someone else to have the option to unplug you if your charge is finished and you're not around. But it also means that if your charge finishes at home, or if you're using a lamppost charger on street in the middle of the night, it becomes easy for someone then to steal your cable. There aren't many instances of this happening that I can find, but it is something to bear in mind going forward. I want to finish by talking about one change that the government could make that will dramatically affect EV charging positively in many ways, one of which is related to cable theft. If the government and National Protective Security Authority recognise EV charging as critical national infrastructure, this would afford EV charger thefts more attention and resources from the police. By making charging critical infrastructure, it changes the crime from something akin to handbag theft to a serious crime with much higher punishments. As an added bonus, it will also make the payment processing function a lot more robust and ensure things like pre-authorizations are returned in a much more timely manner. So, what do you think about cable thefts? Have you experienced this yourself? Have you seen chargers with cables cut? I must admit, I personally haven't up until now, and as a proportion of the total number of chargers in place, the number's very small, but it's a growing crime and it does need to be handled appropriately. Let me know in the comments. Thanks. It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with the listeners. In 2022, 64% of Helsinki's energy for heating still came from coal. Now, after closing its last coal plant, that's dropped to zero. A few years ago, if you turned on the heat in an apartment in Helsinki, the energy typically came from coal. But the city's power company shut down one coal plant in 2023, and the remaining one closed this week, 4 years earlier than the target set by the national government. Couple that with the UK closing the Ratcliffe power plant in Nottingham last September, and you've got two examples of coal-dependent companies weaning themselves off and replacing them with less noxious methods of providing electricity. Arthur Scargill will be shaking his head in defeat. The EV Musings podcast is sponsored by Zapmap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. Zapmap is free to download and use with subscription plans for enhanced features, such as using Zapmap in-car on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and discounted charging across thousands of charge points. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's show. If you have any thoughts, comments, criticisms, or other general musings to pass on to me, I can be reached at info@evmusings.com. On the socials, I'm on Blue Sky at evmusings.bsky.social. I'm also on Instagram at evmusings, where I post short videos and podcast extracts regularly. Why not follow me there? Thanks to everyone who supports me through Patreon on a monthly basis and through coffee.com on an ad hoc one. If you enjoyed this episode, why not buy me a coffee? Go to coffee.com/evmusings and you can do just that. ko-fi.com/evmusings. Takes Apple Pay too. Regular listeners will know about my 2 ebooks. So you've gone electric, and so you've gone renewable. They're 99p each or equivalent, and you can get them on Amazon. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as a link to my regular EV Musings newsletter and associated articles. I know you're probably driving or walking or jogging now, but if you can remember, and you enjoyed this episode, drop a review in iTunes, please. It really helps me out. Thank you. If you've reached this part of the podcast and are still listening, thank you very much. Why not let me know you've got to this point by messaging me at musingsev.bsky.social with the words, "Stop! Thief!" Hashtag if you know you know, nothing else. Thanks as always to my co-founder Simon. Another quiet week from him. Guess he's enjoying his electric unicycling. Thanks for listening. Bye.